Hello and welcome to vlog number 3. It's a horrible day, as you can see, so I've decided to do this instead of going out riding today. Now what this episode is all about is the setup of jump pads. Now before we start, I'm just going to make a differentiation. I'm not sure. There's power pads and there's jump pads. Power pads are like the pads offered by EUC Guy or Frank's pads. They are in a similar placement, I guess, to the standard Gotway pad, but they are slightly flared out on EUC Guy's pads, power pads, and on Frank's pads they are more blocks which you can lean against for acceleration and rear. Had a go on an MSP with Frank pads and an MSS with EUC Guys pads, and they're amazing. They're really great for carving, they're really great for acceleration. You can really get a lean on the EUC Guys pads. They're great, but I personally prefer to use jump pads, and the reason for that is I think it's important to be able to lift the wheel over obstacles in the road to avoid overpowering the motor and cutting out, basically. So there's several different types of jump pads on the market. There's Clark's pads, which I would love to try. I'm actually going to contact him and order some from my Nicola, I think. Depends how expensive they are. But for this episode, I'm going to focus mainly on jump pads for the M Super shape of wheel. MSX, MSP, MSS, whatever model you have, it's the same shape really. And they are going to be, well, you're going to know what I mean when I show you my wheel downstairs and by the drawings I've done. So the issue I've had recently when I've gone on other people's wheels to try them out, and obviously they want feedback as to how I think they are performing. I went to a demo day this weekend, hosted by E-Rides. Thanks for that, Afiz. It was absolutely awesome. I had a great time, but I found it a little bit difficult to ride the wheels properly because the pads were placed in a different way to how I place my pads. So what I'm going to do here is just explain where I place my pads and why I do it that way, and you can decide yourself whether you want to try this or not. I'm not saying I'm right, but this is just my theory and thinking behind this. So I've done some drawings, and it took me ages. I actually traced them. I'm not very good at drawing at all, as you'll see. They're divided into two different categories. Category A, you can't see. I'm going to put a camera down in a second. Category A, which is where the pads have been placed on many different wheels that I've tried out, and category B, which is how I have my pads. And you'll see there's a slightly different placement, which leads to slightly different handling. And I'm just going to go through the theory behind why I've placed my pads in the place that I have compared to how other people have chosen to have their pads. Now, category A, let's see if I can do this properly. No. Right. So imagine if we put that there, I can go A to B. Yeah, that works. So A is when the pads are in a place maybe slightly further back on the wheel, and when you lean forward to accelerate, your leg is leaning up against the pad totally. So this is written forward because that means we're travelling forward at this point. Now, on my pads, I have them set up like this. So when I lean forward, I'm not actually touching the pad or the front part of the pad. I'm simply putting my weight forward and I'm gripping with my knees at this point. Now, the next scenario is braking or a hard stop. When your pads are put forward, there's a gap at the back, usually, where your legs are, and the only way you can stop is by kind of leaning backwards, which works. You can stop pretty efficiently by doing that. But what I decided to do was put my pads a bit more forward, and as you can see, it looks like I'm going to the toilet, because when I hard brake, I really sit down, and I find that when your pads are more forward, you can get like more contact with your leg here, and you can sit down harder, and as a result actually brake harder. So that's the when they're forward, you kind of like have this leaning back effect when you're braking, whereas when you are having the pads set a bit more forward, you can do what I'm doing now, it's just to sit down. And actually what we're trying to do when we brake is just get as much force back there as possible. So leaning your body is not really actually as effective as just sitting your whole weight down and having an imitation toilet situation, which you might be having if you're having in an emergency. Now, the main reason for having my pads set a bit more forward is actually for this scenario. I will demonstrate how I have them first, I guess. If you hit a bump, and your wheel is forced up this way, if your legs are free to move, like this, if your legs are free to move move forward when there's a bump, you can absorb it much better than if your legs were locked in. So that's what happens when I hit a bump. That's what happens when I want to jump. I lift the wheel up with my ankles and I can bend my knees to enable the wheel to be lifted up, essentially. The fear is, for me anyway, when you're leaning against the front of the pad here to accelerate or hard accelerate, and you hit a bump, well, it's the same, isn't it? Your legs can't go anywhere. And my fear is if you hit a bump with enough force and your legs are like locked in here, well, the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to go forward and potentially cut out if you can't absorb that bump. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about I've lost what I was going to say, so I'm going to remember what I was going to say and then cut it in. Right, so I've remembered now. Thank you for your patience. It's the Largo, I guess. It's to do with foot position. Now, the reason I said before in another video about stance, I'll link it at the end of this one, that I ride with my feet straight forward or if anything, slightly tilted in, because I guess there's some confusion about the point of these pads on the front of these jump pads. They are lean pads for, I believe, when you want to give that wheel an extra bit of torque when you're going up an extra steep incline, and when you want to kind of bump with your legs to push it up something, they're there for that. Or if you're going up a very steep slope slowly, you can lean against them for that. If you ride with your feet slightly pigeon-footed and you want to accelerate, this is not meant to be a crotch shot, might be, maybe it is, and you have your feet, oh, you can't see my feet, damn. And you have your feet slightly in and you just lean forward, your legs automatically grip the wheel as they get, if your feet are pigeon-footed and you just lean forward to go forward, your legs grip the wheel anyway, so you don't need to lean against the pads to accelerate or to torque the wheel. You just do it naturally. And so when you're hard accelerating and you're just gripping the wheel and you hit a bump and you need to bend your legs, it doesn't matter because you just slip a little bit. Whereas if you're leaning against the pads, it's really hard to avoid a cutout or a crash if you hit a bump and you constantly like a bit trapped in. So with that said, I'm going to talk a little bit now about like turning or initiating a turn on the M Super sort of shape with these kind of pads. And actually, I mentioned it before in this last video I did about stance. I'm going to take this one. I'm in opposite hand right now. Let's say this is my left leg. And, well, it is my left leg actually from the way I've drawn it. And I want to turn right. I'm going to lift the heel off the pedal. And I'm going to push my ankle, which is being very well drawn, against this part of the pad. And I'm going to keep my knee free. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm not just lifting the leg to get my weight over to the other side, I'm also wrapping my knees around the front of the wheel. So I'm going to go this way. I'm going to lift this leg. And I'm also going to push this knee forward a little bit. And that also, it kind of helps the wheel start turning. Wrapping the knees is quite important for stability. I noticed it mostly when I was riding the Nicola. It gets thinner at the front and back. And if I didn't wrap the knees whilst I turned, I sometimes got these like crazy wobbles. So it's quite important to remember like about your knees being forwards and backwards in the turns, as well as just leaning. And if you're riding duck-footed, when you accelerate, what happens is your legs actually this is an exaggerated version. Your legs become, when you bend forward, loose. So if you're doing that, you might want to have something to lean against, but then there's this whole cutout issue. So I'm going to get changed now. I'm going to go for a meal, non-alcoholic meal with a friend, the other side of town, and I'll take my GoPro with me and I'll film me doing some carving, and I'll try and give a demonstration about what I'm talking about. Cheers. Okay, so I tried to film myself before and it did not work because my trousers were too baggy. So I've gone from the most baggy item of clothing that I own to the most skin tight. So I'm wearing this zebra, I guess, and I've made this torch which I'll put my GoPro on top of, so you can hopefully see my legs a bit better. Cool, see you in a bit. Okay, so I'm on the MSS from EUC service with the Russian pads on, and I'm going to head down this street here. I'm going to hit some bumps and do some carving, and you're going to hopefully be able to see what I spoke about before. So, let's go. I'm blind! It's never night. So if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.